Yo, what up? It's Darius, and welcome back to the SQL Server Series. In this video, we are going to learn how to create result sets that contain data from two or more tables. And to do that, we're going to have to use either a join or a union clause. The most common type of join that most programmers use is the inner join. And when using the inner join, only those rows that satisfy the join's condition are going to be included in your result set. A join condition names a column in each of the two tables that are involved in the join and then indicates how the columns should be compared. In most cases, you're going to join two tables based on the relationship between the primary key in one table and a foreign key in another table. Now, you can join tables based on relationships not defined in the database, but that's usually not recommended. So, just what is a primary key and a foreign key? Well, a primary key is a key in a database that is unique for each record. It's a unique identifier like a California ID or a vehicle identification number, and every database must have at least one primary key. Now, a foreign key is a key that is used to link two tables together. A foreign key is a column in one table that can refer to a primary key in another table. And an easier way to understand it is by knowing that the table containing the foreign key is a child table to the parent table that contains the primary key. So now that I just bombarded you with a huge load of information, let's step into some examples on how to use inner join to join two tables together using a primary key and a foreign key relationship. So the two tables I'm going to join together using our inner join is going to be the vendors table to the invoices table. And the vendors table is going to be the table that's going to have our primary key. And the invoices table is going to have our foreign key. Let's take a look at how it looks. So first I'm going to do is select all from vendors. And then I'm going to use the join, which is our inner join. And then I'm going to join invoices, and then I'm going to do that on vendors dot vendor ID is equal to invoices dot vendor ID. The on is our join condition, which is one condition here, and vendors is the table that we're accessing, and then we're using the dot separator in between the table and its column. That is our primary key. And then we're going to use the equal sign to follow it to indicate that whatever comes after this equal sign, the table and the column, is going to have a relationship with our primary table here that we are doing our join. And so we have our invoices table here, and then the dot separator between the table and our column, which is going to be the foreign key, which is the vendor ID. And these two columns have a relationship together. So now if you run this query, now we have results set from both tables. We have our vendor table here. You can see this is right where our vendors table ends, and then it picks up the invoices table here. And because we're joined on vendor ID, we're going to get records from both tables where the vendor IDs match. Now the reason why we had to use the dot separator here between the table and the columns is because SQL has to be able to distinguish the difference between these two columns, these two vendor IDs, and the only difference that it'll be able to distinguish it by is the server, the database, and the table. And so since we're running on the same database, which is AP for both of these two tables, the next line down is the table, and we have to separate that using the dot separator and then the column name. Another way to specify your inner join is to put inner in front of join, and that's how you know you're using an inner join. And that's good programming practice if you're writing your SQL code and you're having other people view your code, and you want them to understand exactly what join it is that you're using. So let's say we wanted to single out some columns from both tables here in our query. Well, I can come up here into my select statement and I can remove my asterisk sign because I don't want every column anymore. And then I'm going to get my invoice number. So I'm going to go invoices dot, because I'm accessing the invoices table since we've got two tables joined together. And to single out our columns, we need to make sure we specify which table we're pulling them from. I'm going to go invoices dot the invoice number, and I'm going to use comma, and then I'm going to go vendors dot the vendor name. So I'm getting my invoices number from my invoices table and my vendor name from my vendors table. And we're going to run this query. And you see now we have our invoice numbers and our vendors names. We've got these two tables joined together into a single result set. Another thing you can do when you join two tables together is you can assign temporary names to the tables. And these are usually called table aliases. And to do that, you use the as phrase just as you do when you assign column aliases. So I'm going to rewrite my query here from scratch, and we're going to use a table alias this time. So I'm going to select all from vendors just like I did before, and then I'm going to inner join the invoices table. But this time what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give my vendors table and my invoices table an alias name. So my alias name, I'm just going to use V as my alias name, as V. And for invoices, I'm just going to use as I. And then I'm going to continue my join. I'm going to do that on v.vendor ID. And then I'm going to set that equal to I.vendor ID. So I'm using my alias instead of the full name of the table to join my primary key to my foreign key here with vendors and invoices. And then I'm going to include my columns in. I'm going to come up here, remove my asterisks, and instead of saying invoices.invoice number, I'm just going to say I.invoice number, and then I'm going to get V for vendors.vendor name. And if we run this query, we will get the same exact result set, except we were able to type less by using our alias names for the two tables. Now keep in mind, when you use table aliases on joins, you can't go back and then say, well, since I have my invoices table aliased with the letter I still want to print out invoices.invoice number. Well, that's not going to work because you already assigned that table with a table alias name, and my SQL is only going to recognize the table alias name. So it has to be I.the invoice number. You can also omit the as clause just like you do with columns and just put your alias name after the table name with a space, and that will work just fine. But again, if you're writing code that you want others to look at and review and understand, then you're going to want to include your as clause for best programming practice. So that is all for this video. In the next video, we are going to move into part 2 on retrieving data from 2 or more tables. So thank you for watching. If you are interested in the next video, head on over to database-tutorials.com. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it, and see you next time.